I still remember the first time Amber walked into my life. It was during one of those after-work yoga classes I had signed up for with a coworker. I wasn't expecting much. I'd always been more of a Pilates person than someone who sat cross-legged and hummed about inner vibrations. But Amber had this presence about her. She was tall, with flowing auburn hair and a smile that made you feel like she knew a secret you didn't. By the end of the class, she had invited me for coffee with a group of her friends. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I was just bored, or maybe I was looking for something new. My name is Clara James, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, with my fiancé, David. We've been together for 5 years, and we're supposed to be getting married next month. Everything was set: the venue, the guest list, even the honeymoon in Mexico. David and I had always been solid, at least I thought we were. But that was before Amber came along. Amber's world was nothing like mine. She talked about astrology as if it explained everything: your past mistakes, your mood swings, your future. She read tarot cards like she was pulling answers from the universe. The first time she gave me a reading, she looked at me with wide, knowing eyes and said, "You're on the verge of a great awakening, Clara, but you have to let go of the old version of yourself first." I laughed it off at the time, but the word stuck with me. When I told David about Amber and her friends, he just smiled and said, "If it makes you happy, go for it." He was always like that, practical, grounded, the kind of guy who balanced our budget on Excel sheets while I spent hours scrolling through Pinterest for wedding ideas. At first, he seemed okay with me going out with them, but I could see something shift in his eyes as I started bringing home crystals, incense, and books on moon phases. Within a month, I wasn't just dabbling anymore. I was obsessed. I dyed my hair a shade of deep violet because Amber told me it aligned with my crown chakra. I spent hundreds of dollars on spiritual kits, everything from rose quartz necklaces to Himalayan salt lamps. My wardrobe changed too. Gone were the fitted blouses and jeans David used to love. I started wearing flowy skirts and loose tops that made me feel like some kind of bohemian goddess. David said they looked like tablecloths. I laughed it off, but it stung. One night, while I was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor meditating, David walked in and just stared at me. "Clara, what's going on with you?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I kept my eyes closed, hoping he'd just let it go. "You've been different lately. You barely talk about the wedding anymore, and it feels like you're somewhere else." I sighed. "David, you're too grounded to understand. I'm on a spiritual journey, and it's changing me for the better." Too grounded. His voice sharpened. "I'm just trying to keep us from losing ourselves in this, whatever this is. I don't even know who you are right now." We fought that night. It wasn't a screaming match, but the words cut deep. He accused me of wasting money on nonsense, and I accused him of being closed-minded and stuck in his ways. For the first time in our relationship, I went to bed angry and didn't care to fix it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe Amber was right. Maybe I was shedding my old life. But when I glanced over at David, asleep and turned away from me, a part of me felt hollow. We had built a life together, and now, for reasons I couldn't explain, it felt like I was slipping out of it. One crystal, one tarot card, one argument at a time. A couple of weeks after that argument, I started spending more and more time with Amber's group. What started as casual coffee meetups turned into long evenings filled with energy-cleansing sessions and late-night talks about past lives. Amber had this way of making me feel like I belonged, like I was part of something bigger and more meaningful than just my 9-to-5 job and a wedding checklist. I began skipping the quiet evenings David and I used to have, our favorite takeout, movies on the couch, and instead drove across town to sit in Amber's living room, where the scent of sage hung thick in the air. David noticed. Of course he did. "Where were you last night?" he asked one evening when I got home after 10. His tone wasn't angry, but I could hear the edge in it. "At Amber's. We were doing a meditation circle. It was amazing, David. You should try it sometime." I dropped my bag and started telling him about this new retreat Amber was planning. A 3-day weekend in the mountains focused on releasing negative energy. He didn't look excited. "Clara, we're already tight on money with the wedding coming up. Do you really think we can afford another retreat? You've already spent a ton on this stuff." "It's not stuff," I snapped, louder than I intended. "This is about my personal growth. Not everything is about spreadsheets and budgets." He just stared at me, like I had said something completely foreign. "I'm not trying to control you. I just don't understand why you're pulling away from us for this." I felt defensive. "I'm not pulling away. I just need this. Amber and her group get me in a way you don't." His face tightened. "So now I don't get you? We've been together for 5 years, Clara." I thought I did. That night, I slept on the couch, pretending I was just too tired to climb into bed, but really I was too angry, or maybe too confused, to face him. The next few weeks were worse. I started going to yoga classes with Amber 3 times a week, and she introduced me to her friends who ran small, spiritual businesses, a woman who sold handmade talismans, another who did aura photography. I bought things without even thinking about the cost. One morning, David handed me a credit card bill with a raised eyebrow. "What's this charge for $370? I rolled my eyes. "It's for the retreat. I told you about it." "You didn't tell me it was that expensive." "It's an investment in myself," I said flatly. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Clara, I feel like I'm losing you to these people. Do you even see what's happening?" I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my keys and headed out to meet Amber for lunch. Later that week, David called his best friend, Mark, for advice. I overheard part of the conversation while I was in the kitchen. Mark, who'd gone through a nasty divorce 2 years ago, told David, "Man, I've seen this kind of thing before. Don't let her drain you dry. You have to talk to her, set boundaries." When David hung up, he looked at me and said quietly, "We can't keep going like this." I didn't know how to respond, because part of me knew he was right, but I couldn't admit it, not yet. By the time spring rolled around, the distance between David and me felt like a chasm. We barely ate dinner together anymore. I'd come home late from yoga or tarot classes, and he'd already be in the bedroom with his laptop, working on animations for a new client. Even when we were in the same room, it felt like we were on different planets. One Friday night, we had plans for dinner. A simple date night at our favorite Italian restaurant, the kind of place we used to go to at least once a month. But I canceled at the last minute because Amber was hosting a full moon ceremony that she swore would change my life. David didn't yell. He just stared at me with this hollow expression and said, "Do you even want to marry me anymore, Clara?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course I do. Don't be ridiculous," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. His face tightened like he didn't believe me, and I didn't even know if I believed myself. Our physical relationship all but vanished. There were nights when I'd be lying in bed scrolling through astrology forums on my phone while David lay next to me, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes I'd feel him shift like he wanted to say something, but he never did. I told myself I didn't care, that he just didn't understand this new version of me. But deep down, I missed him. I missed us. One Saturday afternoon, I was sitting in the living room arranging my crystal collection when I caught him watching me from the doorway. "Clara," he said, his tone weary, "I don't know who you are anymore. You've changed so much, and not in a good way." I snapped. "Maybe I've just grown, David. Maybe you're too closed off to see that." He shook his head. "Or maybe you're letting other people tell you who you're supposed to be." The conversation spiraled into yet another argument, but this time, something shifted. That evening, when David was out walking to clear his head, I glanced at my phone and noticed a text notification. "Hey, goddess. Tonight's energy will be powerful. Can't wait to see you. Alex." My heart stopped. I had never mentioned an Alex to David. I met Alex a couple of weeks earlier during one of Amber's weekend retreats. He was a fitness instructor with long hair tied back and a lean, easy confidence. He led the yoga sessions and spoke about aligning body and spirit in a way that felt intoxicating. At first, it was harmless flirting, or at least that's what I told myself. But the truth was, I'd felt a pull toward him that I couldn't deny. David noticed the change. He started glancing at my phone whenever I got a message. One night, while I was in the shower, he picked up my phone from the counter. When I came out, he was sitting on the bed holding it, his face pale. "Who is Alex?" he asked. I froze. "He's just someone from the group." "Someone from the group?" His voice cracked. "Are you kidding me? Are you seeing him?" I didn't answer right away, and that silence was enough. Finally, I muttered, "We have a connection, David. Something spiritual. Something you wouldn't understand." His eyes filled with disbelief and hurt. "So that's it. 5 years, an engagement, and you're throwing it away for some guy who waves crystals around?" I felt the weight of his words, but couldn't bring myself to apologize. "I can't marry you, David," I whispered. "I found my true path with Alex. This, us, maybe it was never meant to be." David sat there in stunned silence, his hand still holding my phone like it had burned him. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't look back. The apartment felt empty when I came back for the rest of my things a few days later. David wasn't there. He'd gone to stay with his friend Mark for the week, but I could tell he'd already started packing away pieces of me. My favorite mug was shoved into a box on the counter, and the photo of us at the Outer Banks, the one we took during our second anniversary, had been turned face down on the shelf. It hit me harder than I expected. I had chosen this. I told myself it was for the best. But standing there, surrounded by cardboard boxes, I felt the first pang of doubt. David didn't call or text after I left. He didn't beg me to come back or send me long messages about how much he loved me. I thought that would make me angry, but it didn't. It just made me feel small, like I had been replaced by silence. Meanwhile, Amber and Alex celebrated my awakening with open arms. I posted pictures of myself at their retreats, smiling with my new group, and convinced myself that I was happy. But David was left with all the wreckage. Our apartment lease, the wedding deposits, the awkward calls to both our families to tell them there would be no ceremony. He was the one returning gifts and explaining to relatives why his fiancée had decided to follow her spiritual path with another man. I heard about it later from mutual friends, who told me that Mark had stepped in to help David sort out the financial mess I'd left behind. The truth was, I hadn't considered the consequences. The wedding deposits were non-refundable. I hadn't even thought about the joint savings account we'd been building for years. David closed it, of course, but I'd already used part of that money for a weekend retreat in Asheville with Alex and Amber's group. When David's lawyer contacted me about reimbursing my share, I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that you blew through their savings because you thought you were investing in your soul? From what I heard, David threw himself into his work. He's an animator, and Mark said he started working late into the night, barely sleeping. He also signed up for a gym membership. At first, I scoffed when I saw a photo of him on social media, sweaty and smiling next to Mark. But then I looked closer. He looked good, healthy, grounded, and maybe even happy. That stung. Alex, on the other hand, loved the attention. He encouraged me to post more about our journey. We took photos with candles, with crystals, with sunsets that looked like something out of a travel blog. I plastered them across Instagram, half to convince myself that I had made the right choice and half to show David what he'd lost. I didn't get a single reaction from him. Not a like, not a comment. Nothing. Amber told me to cut ties with toxic energy, but every time I closed my eyes at night, I saw David's face the day I told him it was over. The way his shoulders collapsed, the way his voice cracked when he asked if I'd ever loved him in the first place. I told myself it was guilt, and that guilt was just an obstacle on my spiritual path. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't guilt. It was the sinking realization that maybe I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. 2 months later, everything in my life felt unsteady. The glow of my spiritual awakening had started to fade. Amber was busy recruiting new people into her circle, and Alex wasn't who I thought he was. The effortless charm that had drawn me and started to feel hollow, almost rehearsed. I'd catch him scrolling through other women's Instagram profiles while I sat next to him, and when I confronted him about it, he'd just smirk and say, "Don't let jealousy block your energy." I started wearing my old clothes again, jeans, fitted sweaters, simple sneakers, the ones David used to say made me look like me. I dyed my hair back to brown because the purple felt like someone else's reflection. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a goddess on a spiritual journey. I saw a woman who had blown up her life for a man who didn't care and a friend who only wanted me around when I was spending money on her retreats. One rainy Thursday night, I found myself parked outside David's apartment. My heart pounded as I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel. I had no idea what I would say if he opened the door. I hadn't seen him since the day I left, but I'd heard from mutual friends that he was doing well. Too well. Something about that burned in my chest, like I had expected him to fall apart without me. But instead, he had built himself up. I knocked, and when the door opened, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, in a good way, and his face looked sharper, more confident. He didn't look like the man I'd left behind. "Clara," he said flatly, like he'd already guessed why I was there. "Hi," I murmured, suddenly wishing I'd rehearsed something. "Hi. I just wanted to talk." He didn't invite me in right away, but after a pause, he stepped aside. The apartment looked different, cleaner, warmer, like he'd rearranged it to erase the traces of me. I sat on the edge of the couch. "David, I'm sorry. For everything. For leaving the way I did. For Alex. For all of it." My voice cracked, and I felt my eyes burn. I got caught up in something that wasn't real. Amber and Alex, they weren't who I thought they were. I wasn't who I thought I was. David leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He didn't look angry, just done. "Clara, I don't know what you want me to say. I want a second chance," I said, my voice trembling. "We were good together, David. I messed up, but I still love you. We can start slow if you want. I can fix this." He shook his head. "You can't fix what's already gone. I'm seeing someone now. She appreciates me for who I am, not for what I can buy or what energy I give off." The words hit me like a punch. I tried to smile, but my throat closed up. "Oh, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for," he said gently, walking me to the door. And just like that, I knew he wasn't mine anymore. After leaving David's apartment that night, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. The rain tapped against the windshield, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel enlightened or spiritually awakened. I felt stupid. I had thrown away the best thing in my life for people who barely even cared if I existed. Amber's circle was starting to show cracks. Her spiritual empire, if you could call it that, was built on selling expensive retreats and overpriced healing kits to people like me who were looking for something to fill the gaps in their lives. But whispers started circulating. Someone accused Amber of pocketing money from a failed retreat that was never organized. Another girl from our group told me she'd caught Alex flirting with attendees while Amber pretended not to notice. I tried to ignore the red flags. I even defended them at first, telling myself they were just misunderstood. But then came the final blow. I had invested nearly $1,000 into some crystal-infused water bottles that Alex swore he was launching as part of a holistic brand. He convinced me it was a good way to manifest abundance. 2 weeks later, the website for the business disappeared, and so did Alex. I called and texted, but he never responded. It turned out I wasn't the only one. Several people from Amber's circle had given him money, and he had simply vanished. Amber pretended she knew nothing about it, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. When I confronted her, she just said, "Clara, this is a test from the universe. If you react with anger, you'll block your own energy flow." That was it for me. I walked away. By then, the fallout had started. My credit card bills were stacked high from all the retreats, and I had no one to turn to. I couldn't ask David, not after everything I'd done. And Amber's spiritual support came with a price tag I couldn't afford anymore. The group unraveled fast after Alex's scam. People stopped showing up for Amber's sessions, and her social media turned into a war zone of angry comments from people demanding refunds. I heard rumors that she'd moved to another city, probably to start over with a new crowd to exploit. As for me, I was left with nothing but debt and regret. The friends I'd abandoned during my awakening weren't answering my calls. My parents said I should apologize to David, but I knew it was too late. He had already moved on, and from what I could see, he was happier without me. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, I saw a post from a mutual friend. It was David at a barbecue, smiling next to a woman I didn't recognize. His arm was around her, and he looked genuinely happy. I didn't cry. I just stared at the photo for a long time and whispered to myself, "You did this, Clara. You threw it all away." The months that followed were quiet. Painfully quiet at first, then strangely peaceful. I stopped going to yoga classes and tarot readings. I packed up the crystals and incense and shoved them into a shoebox that I left in the back of my closet. Without Amber or Alex around, I started to see just how much of my life I'd given away for a false sense of belonging. David, on the other hand, seemed to be thriving. I didn't reach out to him anymore. I didn't have the right. But through mutual friends and social media, I learned that his animation work had taken off. He'd recently signed on with a major studio for a big project, something he'd been dreaming about for years. He was working out, spending time with Mark, and dating a woman named Lauren who, according to everyone who met her, was sweet, grounded, and exactly the type of person David deserved. Seeing him happy without me used to feel like a knife in my chest. But after a while, I stopped feeling angry or jealous. Instead, I started feeling something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Admiration, pride, even. David was the kind of person who rebuilt himself instead of waiting for someone to save him. He didn't need me, and I realized that was okay. Maybe he never should have needed me. I spent a lot of time reflecting on the choices I'd made, not just with David, but with myself. Why had I been so eager to throw away everything stable and good in my life for a group of strangers selling spiritual enlightenment? The truth hurt. I'd been lost, craving meaning, and I'd mistaken the chaos of Amber's world for freedom. But now, I had to face the reality I'd created on my own. Slowly, I started to rebuild. I picked up extra shifts at the marketing firm where I worked, determined to pay down the debt I'd accumulated. I even signed up for therapy, something I used to roll my eyes at but desperately needed. It was in therapy that I learned just how much of my life had been spent looking for validation from other people. Amber, Alex, even David. I had always tried to mold myself into who I thought they wanted me to be. For the first time in years, I started asking, who am I when no one's watching? Meanwhile, David was flourishing. Mark mentioned once, during a brief phone call, that David had been talking about moving in with Lauren. She's good for him, Mark said carefully, as if he knew I didn't want to hear it. But I surprised him by replying, I'm glad. He deserves someone who won't take him for granted. It was true. I had no right to hold on to bitterness anymore. David had found a new chapter, and so had I, though mine was still being written, one messy page at a time. Sometimes, when I scroll through social media and see pictures of David smiling with Lauren, I wonder if he ever thinks about me. Not in a romantic way, but as someone who was once part of his life. Does he ever look back and remember the girl I used to be, before all the chaos? Maybe. Maybe not. It doesn't matter anymore. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, I'm starting to find peace with myself. Not through crystals or tarot cards, but by taking responsibility for my life. David is building something real and lasting with someone new. And me? I'm learning how to stand on my own 2 feet again. No magic, no false awakenings. Just me, finally starting over.